Hey, okay, it's time for another class. We are going to do a lesson in pre-calc right now, actually. I mean, technically it's algebra 2, but it's intended to be a warm-up for pre-calc. So we're going to jump right into the idea of absolute values, okay? Absolute values. The value is absolute. So math is a language. Everything that we say or do in the context of math, we have to say, okay, what does that mean? And then we have to translate it to the symbology, okay? So it did a little algebra refresher yesterday, and we're going to jump into now, we're going to be starting to do pre-calc. There's also algebra. There's plenty of algebra videos, okay? If you've come here and you're, don't worry, it'll segue around. Absolute value, okay? So I have a marker. It is 1, right? If I give you the marker, we could write that mathematically, depending on the context, as a -1. I gave it to you, okay? Now, I am at -1, because of course I also have other markers. So that's from my perspective, it's a -1, okay? Well, absolute value just is interested in the object itself, okay? Because from your perspective, you would have added 1, right? I would have subtracted 1. Absolute value is just like, we just want to deal with what is the thing, and the thing is the 1, right? The 1 marker. Versus, if I gave you these, it would be 3, right? -3, +3. And that's how we would write it, right? Now just remember the symbols, right? +3, -3, okay? Absolute value is just the objective number, which in this case, if it was those markers, is 3. Now, when I was younger, and I've taught many kids this, the absolute value symbol, right, just turns the number positive. Absolute value equals 3, -3 equals 3, absolute value of 3 is 3. That's correct. Correctamundo. Okay? But, /and, we are talking about absolute value at a slightly higher level. We're talking about it in the realm of now leading into algebra 2 pre-calculus. I mean, this is kind of a little bit algebra 1 stuff too, but okay, well, what if, though, you have a linear function that has an absolute value, right? Now we go, okay, what does that mean? So if I said absolute value of x plus 2 equals 5, right? Okay, you might go, oh, that's 3. 3 plus 2 is 5. Boom, done. Done! And then you say x equals 3, and you'd circle it. And if you have a teacher worth their worth, they won't give you all the points because you've only come up with one answer, when in fact there are 2. Okay? Now, we're going to do a quick lesson poo on one aspect of this, and then we're going to do another one on the graph. Okay? So let's just solve this algebraically, and then we'll talk about the graph. Okay? So just as a refresher, these symbols, okay, we'll get it nice and close because I really need to, don't worry, I'm getting a new whiteboard. These symbols, right, straight up, straight down, are absolute value, all right? To children everywhere, please watch this because we're going to look at it right now, okay? We're going to pay attention to this. Isn't this so high-tech? Okay, in fact, we'll do this, and then we're going to solve a second one to remind you the difference between absolute value and parentheses. So, in fact, I'm just going to change this a little bit right now. We're going to make this a 6, and we're going to make this a 2, okay? And now you might immediately say, oh, Miss Thompson, I know the answer is 1. Because 1 plus 2 is 3, and 3 times 2 is 6. Okay? But again, only one answer. So let's just go around this for a second. Let's look at this and make sure, before we solve it, that we know the difference between this. So, zoom in if you need to. Let's pay attention. This is very different from this. Okay? Do you see the differences? Okay? For those of you in the back of the class. This is absolute value. This is parentheses. Okay? So, there are Multiplication and multiplication. Both of them are multiplication on the outside. So many young people learning, even maybe adults out there. Hi, moms and dads. Go. Guardians, tutors, friends, siblings. Go, oh, I know, I use the, do you remember this? If you start doing these arrows, okay, I'm going to do a lesson on this. I've done 1,000 on this already. What do we call this? Where we multiply it by both. You go, oh, it's 2 times x plus 2 times 2. We call that the, do you remember it? The distributive property. Okay, that's all fantastic. And then I have seen, I almost said millions. I've definitely taught tens of thousands of students, and approximately half have done an incorrect thing, which is try to distribute into an absolute value sign. You cannot do that, okay? Because parentheses is like, I'm batching this over here. Do this last, right? Or do this together, right? Like folding clothes. Here, we're going to do those later. There, it's a batch, okay? But it's just a batch that whatever is external happens to everything, right? So if I'm just going to label everything in this room mine, and I take my pen, and I'm like, I'm labeling my name on all these. Miss Thompson, Miss Thompson, Miss Thompson, right? Miss Thompson, right? I just label everything. But this it's not, you can't quite do it mathematically. You can't do it the same way because absolute value is an operation. It's a second operation, right? So this is the multiplication. Yeah, that's good. Good job. But this is also an operation that has to be dealt with in a different manner, okay? So here's where it also gets a little, because what you can do to the parentheses, you have to do, you can do it to parentheses. It's an option. But it's the only option, aka you have to do it for absolute value. Okay? And so then sometimes that wiggle room gets people confused. So it's important to start with comprehending the symbology. All right, so here's what we do. And since this is a refresher for a higher level, we're not going to do, normally if this is the first time you've seen this, I may have other videos on this that do this the first time, but we're just going to refresh ourselves, okay? This will be a little shorter because we don't like going more than 10 minutes. Okay. So the first thing you have to do, so this is inverse operation. So you find your equal sign. I like to do a little balance line. That's because I've taught every level from pre-algebra through calculus, and this is just a really easy way for people to keep things in track. Okay, just a light little line that you're just gonna, Red Rover things across. So inverse operations, we've already established you cannot distribute this. So this is multiplication, inverse operation is division, right? Divide by 2, divide by 2. Then we get, everything remains the same, absolute value x plus 2 equals, and now you do this operation, right? 6 divided by 2 is 3. Okay, now, as we discussed, absolute value is absolute value. So these are going to, the only way to undo the absolute value is to take the two values. So remember our markers, right? Now rewrite this up here. Absolute value of 3 is 3. Absolute value negative 3 is 3. Okay? So to undo this, we have to account for these two values. Okay, two options. So we have then, what I usually do is I show like this, okay, like a little tree, because I want students to comprehend, and then it's I'm going to tell you kids, parents, tutors, it's for a teacher to see that. You go, like on a test or homework or whatever, you're like, this kid gets it, okay? They get that it's splitting. If your paper's like crazy town, a lot of teachers just give up because they've got 800 students. Let's be plain. Okay. So now what we have, and now we drop the absolute value bar. You have x plus 2 equals 3. And here's where this is sticky. And we usually say or / and. Okay, it depends on the context. X plus 2 equals negative 3. We don't know. It's one or the other. It's a mystery box. You go in the darkened cave, and then you come back out in the real dark cave of imaginary numbers, but we'll talk about that later. Okay. And now we solve these both separately. So now you have a new balance line for each. And these are relatively simple because there's a singular event, negative minus 2 from both sides, right? Which over here, you get x, x equals 1. And over here, you get, subtract 2 from both sides, and you get x equals negative 5, right? Because we're getting more negative. Okay, so like we said at the top, you could have been like, I know, Miss Thompson, I know, 1 plus 2 is 3, 3 times 2 is 6, boom, done, right? But you have to account for the negative 5, right? Now graphically, which we'll remind you of tomorrow, it creates essentially a V with the vertex and all blah, 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 right? But the negative 5, let's plug it back in and check. Negative 5 plus 2 is what? Well, if we need a quick trip down memory lane of our number line, we're over here at negative 5, and there's positive. And now we've gone 1, 2 backwards toward the positive direction. We're at negative 3, right? Negative 3, absolute value is positive 3. Positive 3 times 2 is, survey says, 6. So, if you were to distribute this, right, you would have only gotten the answer of 1. You can't do it with absolute value. Okay, we're at time. Have a good one. Thanks for being great. Please like, subscribe, and share because that's what you got to do. You know, even a teacher's got to eat. And especially a master teacher, young Padawan. Have a good one. I'll see you tomorrow.